Hold on this. Hello, everyone. So today we are welcomed by Sandy Hilton, marvelous Sandy Hilton from America, and the wonderful Katie Kelly from Canada, and I'm Julie Bond from Wales. So we're having an intercontinental chat. We were just about to chat about what Sandy's been up to, because you've been really busy making some really cool resources.
I am. Well, Carolyn Van Dyken and I are in the final stages of revising the Why Pelvic Pain Hurts book. And I'm so excited about this talk because one of my charges for it is updating our GMI section, which I already know it's going to have a question mark after it. so we'll say graded motor imagery question mark, and then talk about what we might actually be doing. So that's fun. And then I have mostly finished writing a book with OPTP, same publishers, for sensory integration techniques. And will come with a little kit of a bunch of different kinds and sizes of balls to sit on or lean against, to do some pressure work after you've calmed things down a little. That took so much longer than I thought it would. It's like, oh, this is a little book. It'll take no time at all.
Everything takes longer.
I think it really, really does. Plus working with an editor is fabulous.
Yeah.
Because she took everything I thought was very clear and made it infinitely clearer and less textbooky. And I didn't think I was being textbooky, but yeah, it just gets better and better. Now we're in the, how do you get an artist to represent that in a way that as a pelvic therapist, I think is good, but as the publishing company doesn't think they're doing pornographic material.
Yeah. Well,
let
you
us know.
Like Katie, because you know, she's got the photographer, she's got the skills.
It was a very interesting discussion with a lawyer.
Oh, I bet it was. I bet it was. Well, I mean, you really wouldn't have identifying marks. It would be very weird for someone to say, hey, I recognize that person. I met them in college.
You wouldn't believe, though, the number of moles and then freckles and cysts that I had to remove from my pictures, though.
But there was someone with a tattoo.
Yeah, so she knew that there's only so much that could be done.
Okay.
Right.
But it's good. It's good to represent all bodies, right?
Yeah.
So amazing.
Moles and tattoos and freckles and everything.
They're all there.
I rejoiced at the amount of pubic hair on show.
Yes. It's funny how you see the trends change as time goes on.
Yeah, and just to make clear, these are not for your personal use. For those people that don't know, this is Katie's vulva image bank, which is a very useful educational tool for pelvic pain, pelvic health patients. Okay, we'll put a link down below whenever we put this on YouTube.
Good.
Sorry, Sandy, go on.
No, I mean, really, that's it. Just writing things. I have a couple of videos I want to make. Like Julie Bond does her beautiful things of some education, and an old student of mine, now a PT for 2 or 3 years, and I are working on some education for male pelvic issues.
That's awesome.
That will be. I asked him if he would like to be the face of it, because there's so little information out there that's good, that's done by men, for men, especially these young guys with problems. They really don't want to be talking to me. So I'm kind of be ghostwriting and helping on the back end, no pun intended, to some good male pelvic education.
Cool. It's very much
cool.
needed. There aren't many places to send. I can't think of any. Yeah, I've got in Wales, I have one pelvic health male physio who was doing his PhD last time I spoke to him pre-COVID, who I always give my male patients the option of seeing him instead of me. And they quite a lot of the time they go see Mark. And the random internationals and all over the country patients I send to Carl Monaghan.
Mm-hmm.
And his pelvic pain community groups seem pretty good.
I love his group for that. And I send a lot of people his way as well.
Yeah. And Bill Taylor.
Bill's good. Yeah. And Tom Astle down in Australia, except for I think he's kind of out of it for a moment doing some other things.
Mm-hmm.
He'll be a really good resource too.
Okay. That's good.
It's growing. It's coming.
Yeah. Rachel Woman It's absolutely fabulous. She's brilliant from a male perspective, but I don't think she's seeing males at the moment. Is she clinically working with them, Katie?
I don't know. I'm not sure. She's just doing her education stuff right now, or research stuff right now.
So she's about to teach her course in Australia.
Yeah.
Brisbane? I think it was Brisbane. I was looking at flights at one point. Idly daydreaming of flying out there to have her teach me, but
Wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah.
that looks good. She's a brilliant brain for everything male pelvic health. The amount that just through small little conversations I've learned from Rachel, post prostatectomy patients, she is a world of knowledge.
And I saw her advert up on Facebook just this week, so I know that they're, I think, moving ahead with everything. It's nice as everything opens back up again. We're seeing courses come to be.
Yes, I think we should just find it like a private, someone who wants to loan us a private jet and pilot, and we can fly around the world doing like a progressive dinner, but with classes.
I was going to say like
Just pick up physios. Pick up physios along the way.
But if we could all make it to one conference again, that would be great. Do you know, you're still on the WCAP team, aren't you? Last thing I looked, you were treasurer still.
For IASP, yes.
Yeah.
So I'll be there in Toronto in September.
But it's
2023, right?
No, it's this year.
This year.
It's this year?
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay.
You got to go. You got to report back for us.
I have one small technical difficulty. I'm going to mute myself for 1 second.
Okay. Oh, she's talking to someone. Yeah, I want to go see IASP. I want to do WCAP. I can't remember when the last WCAP. WCAP was 19, then it should have been 21, and it'll be 23, I'm guessing.
Well, I was planning to go to Toronto in 2023, so I'm glad you guys cleared that up for me. Oh my gosh.
It's this year. So Sandy, is WCAP 2023?
World Congress will be 2023, and I want to say it's going to be in Spain.
Oh, yes. That's good for me. And now, Katie, closer. I mean, your kids will be another year and a half older. You can jump on a plane.
Should be fine. I'm sure my husband will have no concerns.
Don't like, I might be wrong about that, but I believe something about Spain.
Spain, brilliant. Yeah. Europe I can do, as long as we're not in World War or, COVID mark 15.
COVID's not a thing, yeah. So
yeah.
But we can still do this, and we can learn on Zoom, even if we don't have a private plane.
Yeah. So talking of learning, there are two things we wanted to chat to you about today. One is just a simple matter of pain, and the second is GMI. So being that
two easy topics.
Yeah, all three of us have just finished. I keep feeling like I've just finished it, but it was like 6 months ago that we finished mixed course, wasn't it?
Because we're still reading stuff. Like to this day. Sandy, that's not a big enough notebook, Sandy.
No. Well, it's just it's not the first one. It's my going back through it notebook to say, okay, I took notes while I was doing it, and they barely make any sense to me at all.
Well, that's because you were awake at like 3 o'clock in the morning trying to do it live.
A couple of them, but I'm going back through. I'm rewatching all of the videos to go back through and kind of be like, okay, that makes sense now. All right, that's what I meant, and that's really helpful.
Have you read Julian and Mick's latest paper?
No, I have it printed. It's in my backpack.
Okay, yeah, the embodied predictive processing model is. I wish I'd read this, like, I don't know, 10 months ago. Although, to be fair, it wouldn't have made as much sense then as it does now. But it explains pain, which is amazing.
I think that's one of the things that has gotten me very excited about. Like, mixed class did make my head explode, but in a lovely way. And some of it really filled in spaces that I didn't know how to explain. Like that they're fine doing it in the clinic. There's no problem. They tolerate movements. This is my very large vaginal example. They tolerate movement and everything. And then 2 days later, they're like, oh, I had the worst flare up. And you're like, okay, so what mechanism did that? And the discussions about the glial cells and the peripheral sensitization were like, oh, okay. Well, then that could make sense. And then how to change it is just do it again and do it again and have it, reinforcing all of the, look, in this moment, it feels good and you're able to do really good, and look at the success of this. And if you end up in a flare or sore later, that's this second kind of protective mechanism where right now everything's being tolerated, but your system still will stir up and it's going to keep protecting you for a while until we get enough positive experiences to outweigh it. At least that's how I explain it to my patients. So I hope that makes sense. Does that pass?
It does. I think Katie and I are, well, I keep saying we. I feel like I talk to you too much, talk for you too much rather than at you.
You say it with a British accent and it already makes me sound smarter.
It sounds smarter.
So my biggest shift, which Katie's gone, yeah, that was painful for me as well, was, so I know it's not just me, was the shift from the very heavily NOI-based training that I've had before, which is very kind of like pain has an intent and a purpose, that it is a protective mechanism, but like not in that way, like it's there to make you, to teach you, or to, as a need state, to ask you to address something. And it's almost that, it's an intent behind it, a function, almost like a personality, or it's a narrative that NOI have spread very well because people learn through stories. All humans learn through stories, and we understand it easily. So they've done really well with their teaching. And I understand that's not necessarily the concept that they're producing, but that's what's come from it. Whereas with Mick, now I definitely have an image of the body being, it's just a homeostatic process. So it's not got an intent, it's just something that occurs. I mean, it does have an intent because it's showing you that there's the prediction it has made about the state of your tissues doesn't match the sensory information to a degree of precision, which they can be precise about the uncertainty at which your tissues are secure. And it's saying, whoa, I have a level of precision in my uncertainty about the state of your tissues. And the response to that is a neuroendocrine immune coupled response, in which a pain experience, because of the processes of those increases in heart rate and blah blah blah, all the things that the neuroendocrine, the NEI system instead of the NOI system, NEI system have created. So it's more like not a passive, but it hasn't got this top-down brain-centric function.
That brain bound image.
Right. Yeah.
What's the word? Nice. Is it called anthropomorphic, when you like apply human characters? It's almost like the brain had become this anthropomorphic object that's like, and I'm going to take all of this accumulated information and assess whether there's a threat or not, and if there's a threat, then I will make you feel pain. And I think that Mick's done a good job at kind of making it from the smallest, tiniest cell in the periphery to the brain and the larger organism as a whole. So it's not so brain bound as it was before.
Yeah,
right. Not neurocentric. Well, it is still neuro, but it's that whole human thing. And he did it. I think it was a really beautiful way of, like you said, the smallest cell in the periphery, because that's really where we started. It's like, and this is a cell. And then all of the communication and up the chain was elegant and mind bending.
The level of complexity. I mean, I keep saying this, but like I know too much about NMDA receptors and magnesium plugs. I don't need to know those things in my day-to-day, but they've stuck somehow. My mum, bless her, she was at my house once when I was desperately listening to Mick, trying to get through hours of lectures, and folding washing for the children in the background. And every time he said dorsal horn, she went, dorsal horn! In the background. And she still comes and says dorsal horn every now and then, because we did 8 hours of dorsal horn. So but it is beautiful and complex. And the slide I've created now for my teaching is much more, cycles and cycles down here and cycles down here and cycles down here, and predictions and prediction versus sensory information. And the fact that, the level of prediction. So beforehand, like you say, Katie, it was this top-down threat reception, prediction, processing, lots of processing about threat. Whereas now you've got a synapse, a peripheral synapse, making predictions about how much information from a certain receptor is going to come in, therefore requiring how many different gates on its synapse. And that itself is a prediction about how much. And the bit that really hit home from the new paper, which was beautiful, which I think, Katie, we talked about last time, was when it was really, I know, I've just reread it again. Didn't have any chocolate, we've run out of it. Ooh, so I always try and do chocolate with pain chats because it's painful. Was that if you've got a sensory nerve firing, so you've got the graph, okay, so level of firing, activity, time, and you've got a limit. So the amount of sensory information coming in, it has a limit at which point it will fire. So basically here down is a prediction on the amount of, on your tissue integrity. So a sensory nerve of temperature, a sensory ending, what are they called? A receptor has this amount of give in its expected predicted level of temperature change. When temperature change is above what it is expected, it fires. So actually any sensory information coming in, because to get to that threshold to be able to fire, you have to have met and gone beyond the level of expected prediction. All sensory information coming in is prediction error. And it's given weight
because it hadn't already accommodated for it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
It's just beautiful, because then the way I see the body now is just this dynamic, beautiful process of constant kind of going, whoa, hang on a minute, we're a bit hot, we're a bit cold, oh, your toes a bit tighter, it's a bit more pressure, oh, there's a bit more stretch than I thought, you know, all of these things constantly going on, information, and your brain is making precision decisions, inferences, given your interoceptive and your proprioceptive information about whether or not that is a precise uncertainty or a imprecise uncertainty, and whether or not to pay attention to it. And that's the level of inference and threat processing, but it's not about processing, it's about homeostasis, I think. Can you say that better than me, please?
I think what was really nice about the paper too, Sandy, you're gonna like the paper, because they go off on a tangent about cultural, societal, economic influences on the neuroendocrine immune system. So it's like, oh, it's that added layer about how people who are constantly under threat, and that's why people who are constantly under threat for other reasons, their finances, their work, their family life, how it does affect the nervous system and the NEI as a whole. So it's like that clicked. I like this paper.
Yeah. Excellent. Good. All right, I will pull it out of my backpack and actually read it. Yeah, I kind of flipped through it when I printed it. Well, I know that if I left it on my laptop, it's not going to get read. That I need it. It needs to be this tangible thing in front of me for me to read it.
Me too.
Old school.
I got notes all over, notes and lines all over mine.
It's the best.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that we're moving well into a direction where it's not just the little piece that hurts, but it's the relation to the human. All of those multiple layers. Julie, I liked how you talk about like wheels and wheels and wheels. And the world that they live in. I mean, it's just really amazing we don't hurt all the time every day.
They also said, there was a really interesting, because I just reread it, and there was a bit where they say, why can't these homeostatic nociceptive processes, because you know, we already know, and it's well accepted, that nociception is constant, but you're not in constant pain, apart from people with chronic pain. Which, you know, the vast majority of the world, we're having nociception all the time, but we don't, nociception is neither required, what was it called, what's Lorimer's quote, nociception is neither necessary nor
sufficient.
Sufficient or necessary for pain. So it's happening all the time, but we're not necessarily having pain experience because that's more complex. And they were saying, why don't these processes go on automatically in the background to homeostatically modify? And there's this really nice bit where they say that like a need state becomes felt when precision weighting is given to that issue. So hunger is felt when there is a lack in nutritional input, and it's necessary for the homeostasis of the system. And so you feel hunger, and it creates a hedonic state because it's linked to other centers in your brain, and it creates this hedonic neuroimmune endocrine NEI driven state where you then go and eat. And extreme hunger, you'll eat lots, but degrees of hunger that levels up. And so pain becomes a felt experience when there is precision about the stability of tissue integrity, given everything, the whole everything Katie's just said within the system. And that's
in a nociceptive state, right? And then in chronic pain is where the signaling, that's where I'm having a hard time describing to patients, I guess, is how do you go from, because I'm so accustomed to using the NOI-based explanations. They've done a really fabulous job at creating metaphors for this. And I'm struggling to find a way to describe this to my patients that's not going into 7 hours of, peripheral nerve receptors.
Let me get my whiteboard. Is it oversimplifying to take Jilly's example of this is homeostasis, and it's normal to hurt. We get too far under or too far over our bounds of homeostasis on a regular basis, but it is not normal for that to persist beyond the normal healing time, beyond the normal recovery time. So it's not that our homeostasis gets off, it's that it stays off that we're trying to help. So even the same pictures from Explain Pain, where it's that normal recovery of pain and then you normally come back down, and it's that dotted line, we're treating this where it doesn't go back to normal, still holds true, because it is still that we're treating in the clinic to try and get back people into that healthy range of tolerance in their tissues. And it was like the load capacity model. We want to get the capacity of all of those structures back to normal so they can manage normal loads. So I think it does still fit. We just use slightly less brain-bound terminology.
Yeah. I think that's what I'm learning as well. It's like, it's not like, and the brain decides. Yeah. Like the body just does.
So Mick, that's why I ended up buying that neuro, I don't even remember its name. It's in my closet. I can go get it. But the philosophy of neuroscience or something like that, where they go into what a neurological fallacy is and how to avoid them. But it is challenging to have conversations with people and not, they're saying my back hurts or my vulva hurts. You would want to stop and correct them and say, no, it's you that hurts. I mean, that's like a dorky, pedantic discussion that we get to have, but I wouldn't ever go into that with a patient, because it goes into their concept of self and how to communicate. And it's hard enough, especially here in the US, to get people to listen to your talk about pain. You wouldn't want to make it worse.
Well, this is the debate we were having the other day. I think I told Laura this and she was very happy. But I think if anything, the course has shifted me away from like my mega pain intervention chat, because I'm definitely in the camp now where I'm a lot more, not passive, but patients understand their own pain much greater than I do. I'm definitely off my pedestal where I was 10 years ago, being like, I know more about pain than you do. They definitely know more about their pain than I do. And do they need it? I mean, the only situation where I'd launch into a long conversation, a long collaborative conversation, would be if their PCS score, their pain catastrophization score, was above 20. Then we know that it's going to be effective if I say, actually, let's talk about pain. Are you okay to talk about? Should we do this? Whereas most of the time, if people say, well, why am I still in pain? I'd do what you just said, Sandy, but just kind of go, well, because what the protective mechanism kind of process driven thing is what patients understand. And I don't think I'm right that we can talk about the semantics of how we've had this massive shift in our understanding, but I don't think I'd say anything different, because it would still be, well, our body is always predicting what the state of our tissues is just to make sure that we're okay. And the information coming in is saying that actually there might be an issue there because you had a 4th degree tear or whatever. And so it was doing a really good job of protecting you, and it kind of hasn't turned off, you know, it's still doing a really good job of protecting you. So it's got a bit stuck trying to protect you. So let's try and calm the whole area down and teach it that it's okay to sit and move and have sex and blah, blah, blah.
And through success and pleasure, which is the part that gets into the what is graded motor imagery, and that in pelvic health anyway, is I love that the way through this seems to be through pleasurable input. And maybe it's just because I feel like sometimes there are so many hard things that isn't it wonderful that something you enjoy can be helpful. And the way to tell, you know, like your own little compass. Am I doing this right for me? Well, do you like it? And if the answer to that is yes, then yeah, I don't have to like it, but they do. And I think that's fabulous. And they get that with sensation. So many great jokes you can tell about how irritating it is when your mother tells you you have to put a coat on because she's cold. You know, it's like, okay, your sensory perception is not the same as mine. I don't need to make you, I can't put enough coats on to make you warm when you look at me. So
that's a really good point. I got to stop putting jumpers on my kids.
It's a tricky thing though, because you'll get a kid that's like literally visibly shivering with little blue and white fingertips, and they're like, I'm not cold, out of pure stubbornness. So
I think that's a good point, Julie, because I think that in my brain, I've had such a big shift in how I think about pain that I feel like my talk to my patients has to change, when in all reality, from a patient perspective, it's not that huge of a shift, right? It's like, instead of me using brain language, I'm going to say your body, or your, you know what I mean? So maybe I'm stressing myself out. But this is like, what, our third or fourth talk? It's taking me like almost half a year now to like come around to this.
Yeah, but it's
Calm
any
down,
big
Katie.
shifts. I mean, this is what we're constantly, I know when all three of us are educating, we're teachers, and when we do our talks, because I've seen all of you speak, that we talk about changing with the times and with new evidence that comes through, and the discomfort it creates. Well, with Katie and I are sitting with this discomfort and bearing our souls of the discomfort, with regularly talking to people, trying to get our heads around it. And it is really hard, but I've gone blurry, but this is the best way to move forward and to develop as a therapist, is to put yourself in uncomfortable positions and learn.
it's so good for our patients. Which is my motivation when I think my brain is going to explode now, and then I hear Mick, no, okay, I am going to explode now.
Yeah.
But it really, it helps, at least at the very least, with my confidence, to be able to understand that it makes me even more confident that pain can change, that it's a matter of finding the right way to get that particular system to shift in a way that's going to be accepted and perpetuated within themselves. It just makes me more confident that exists. So I can.
Well, it's a lived experience we all have, isn't it? We know it can change.
Yeah. But faced with someone who has hurt for years and has been told repetitively, I might be going through this with some patients at the moment, who's being told repetitively that this is as good as their pain will get. And anyone who's trying to tell you it can get better than this is just trying to take money from you.
Way to set up expectations for future treatments, eh?
Right? Don't go chasing any more treatments. Don't go to people that think that they can help you feel better. This is as good as you're going to get. And you need to now put all your focus and your energy on accepting that and living the best life under these conditions. And there's some beauty in there, but there's also some, seriously, really? Did you just do that to that person?
Yeah.
Of tell them, well,
I think there are elements of, within the profession, even thinking of kind of ACT in the clinic, where they would go through a more human-centered, getting them to live within their bounds and experience life alongside whatever they're having.
And try and be as least uncomfortable and tortured by your pain as possible.
Yeah.
There's truths in it for sure, but there's also something to be said about hope and the fact that I find that it's like always stages of life where changes will happen. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
So that's a difficult message, I think, to give. It's a difficult message to receive. I think there's grains of truth in it, but I don't think that it's completely true.
Right. I mean, like there is some good things. Like, yes, absolutely. Don't wait. Don't miss out on your life now waiting to feel better.
Yeah.
Because it is often in doing those things and getting engaged and doing things you enjoy that will help you feel better. We know you can't rest pain better, so you gotta move it and use it. And it's a personal flaw of my own. You don't have to pick the hardest way to do it.
Yeah. Totally. I think that's a good message for all of us in life. I'm going to take that from you today, Sandy. There's so many things I've borrowed from you over the years.
Well, remind me periodically, because I do tend to take the hardest way. Like if I was a little cartoon drawing and there was this beautiful clear path and then one with all the rocks and stuff, I'd be like, oh, that looks fun.
I'll write another book during lockdown. Yeah.
Why not?
So if you were gonna, I mean, like, this is a bit cruel of me, but Laurie managed to ask Katie the other week. So I think this is funny and topical. If you were going to explain pain to me and what you now understand of pain, not for a patient, but just from mixed course, what did you take from it? What is pain?
Pain is a normal, beneficial process that can warn us of imminent danger or help us to look more carefully at what we might be engaging in. So it's either happening or it may be. And that's a really, really good thing. And sometimes it gets it wrong. And we end up in these cycles of protective responses and inflammatory responses that prevent us from tolerating normal movement, normal pressures, normal sensation. And then just because, why not make it a little more weird? That dysregulation can feed itself. So without even any more input that's out of the normal bounds, it can keep acting like there is. And it's not permanent, and it can be reversed. But we would never want to be in a state where we turn that off. We just want to get it back in its normal range.
So what was different, and what was the leap, or what were the leaps that you made?
Really the peripheral sensitization as a more than just a word of, yes, the nerves get sensitized peripherally, and it has to do with receptor cells, but really.
But Sandy, you knew that beforehand. I
knew that bit, but I didn't understand the, oh gosh, I want to call it beautiful, because I really almost find this glorious in how complex it is, of the glial system's ability to just randomly on its own decide to turn something up. It's like, really? Thanks. But it can. And I guess I didn't understand how separate those can be. That you can have the peripheral nerve sensitivity with the increased receptor cells and things, but then there's also these little glial cells around the outside going, it's worse than you think, and making it even more sensitive. Like my brother, there's a monster under your bed, thanks, and just turning up the upregulated state of a nerve that might be healing beautifully, but its neighbors are whispering things at it to make it more sensitive. And that can be changed. So for me particularly, well, that and the I've taken it out of my head so thoroughly I can't remember what the phrase was. That's what I'm trying to find again. Was the thing we used to talk about how repeated sensitization would do something in the nervous system, but he was like, that's only in
wind up,
yeah. That taking that out of how
that's
I
only
explain
in rats or something. It's not in human models,
right? The other thing that I really loved, which I don't talk to patients about, was just the sheer amount of communication. And you talked about that, Jilly, just the sheer amount that's barraging our system all the time. And when you think of that and the glial influence can turn that even higher. It's like, oh, no wonder people stay sensitized. Like, all right. So I think that just an appreciation of the elegance of the system and what a sack of neurochemicals we are. But for everything that sounds overwhelming, it can be used in both directions. It doesn't just go one way. And I think Mick did a really nice job of saying that often. Or maybe I desperately needed to hear it, so I heard it every time he said it, kind of like your mom. Doors open.
Totally. He did repeat that. Okay, Katie, what were your takeaways?
From Mick's course?
Yeah.
Or from Sandy's explanation of Mick's course?
Because every time we get someone to explain
Mick,
it to us,
I'm sorry.
understand it a bit more.
It's funny because every talk that I have, I feel like a little bit more solidifies, and I really feel like I'm starting to understand that the shift that I was so scared about is not as big a shift as I thought. That it's not. I think I think with the neuromatrix theory, I think that I almost thought it was like, well, like the neurotags, like all of this information was kind of coming into the central nervous system and up to the brain, and it was ping-ponging around, and like a decision was made to feel pain or not. And I've gone past that now. I'm like, nah, it's not, it doesn't, I think you used the word intentional, Jilly. It's like, it's the intent, it's not as intentional as that. This is more that it's from the tiniest little cells, receptor cells in the periphery, which are self-evaluating themselves and giving feedback to the next line in the chain. And the next line in the chain gives input to the next line, but it also goes back and gives input back to the first. So it's just this long chain of evaluations that are constant, consistent, and perpetuating, and can be influenced by the outside factors that we've all talked about before, nutrition and diet and stress and society, and that there will be an outcome that is then continually evaluated as well. That's it.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
And it's like, if you try and draw that on a whiteboard, it's just a whole bunch of arrows going.
It's just a bunch of
different directions.
You draw a washing machine. That's
I
enough.
keep trying to draw this like arrow.
Yeah.
Every
I've
time I'm like
tried.
adding a new arrow on. Yeah. Oh yeah, that arrow.
I've tried it and it ends up looking like, the ball of rubber bands.
Mhm.
Yes. But you know
get-
what? Isn't that a good metaphor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
So
that might be
going
the
on.
metaphor.
Now I need to get a ball of rubber bands.
Yeah. Put that
yeah.
in with your ball pack that you're creating. Put a ball of rubber bands in as well.
Oh, could you imagine? I do tell everyone, please do this with clothes on. But
Yeah.
could you imagine being able,
That would be sad. That
Silly.
would be bad for the pubic hair.
yeah, I'm
Really?
thinking
Oh.
that's an awkward depilatory. Don't see that goes back to that. You could do it the easy way, you could do it the hard way. Don't do it that way. That's the hard way.
No. Jilly,
What?
can we ask Sandy about GMI,
Yeah.
not GMI? Okay,
Yeah.
go.
Why not
Sandy, Katie and I are slightly obsessed with graded motor imagery for pelvic pain, and we don't think it's graded motor imagery. And we've had a few chats now about why it's not. What do you think it is, and why do you think it works?
Easy.
Yeah.
That's what pain was. I'm on the big
This is
question.
just in the middle
She's
of the
doing
day,
great.
and I don't even have tea in front of me. I have nothing here to go. I'm going to answer those in two different ways, two different questions. So, what do I think we're doing when we do graded motor imagery in the pelvis? I think we are getting a person to attend to a spot that they have either to attend normally, whatever that is, to a spot that they have either been purposefully putting away from themselves so they don't have to feel it, or feeling it more often and too much and too loud. So they're not really in normal range. So I think we're getting them to attend normally. Some of the things I love about graded motor imagery, where you're establishing ownership and laterality, we can establish ownership. I have a patient who told me that we did a vaginal assessment and it was absolutely boring. There was nothing, I'm not telling you your vagina is boring at all. It's just that there was no pain, there was normal movement, there was normal muscle control and things. And she got off the table and she's, I don't even know whose vagina that was. And I was laughing so hard.
Interesting.
Maybe you should go meet that one.
Yeah.
She goes, yeah, I'm not sure where that vagina came from because it's not the one I'm used to. And I just thought that was such an amazingly profound statement and also hilarious. But she was laughing, and that was her. It was like, well, go make friends.
That statement that you just said there was something I took from your course in whenever it was, 2017. Where good, bad, boring on sensory assessment. I use that so much. It's brilliant. That you're wanting it to be boring. You don't want it to be good. You don't want it to be bad. You just want it to be boring. It's sensory.
And so when people aren't in that space, we can use body ownership and sense of self and ability to attend to it through imagining the part. Problematic in pelvic health to imagine someone else's part. So some of the common tools we would use for that with hands and backs and feet are funny, but not necessarily helpful for pelvic conditions. And there's so much cultural sensitivity and personal comfort and stories of shame and horrible experiences that can go with the areas that sometimes need to be taken into account before you can progress, and other times have to be or could be done simultaneously. That's a really not easy answer to this question. Sorry.
It's not an easy question, and we keep asking. So I think what you touched on there really nicely is that what I keep going on about, and Katie's on the fence. I don't know if you're on the fence, but you've not jumped on my bandwagon yet, that I think we're predominantly in the psychology zone.
Oh no, I agree with you on that.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm researching in a psychology lab. I'm not even in a physio lab. So
okay,
well, that's so cool.
So what you just said about cultural sensitivity and shame, that we have to attend to that. So these really kind of high psychological concepts that then allow us to attend to the sensory integration. And that's why it's
so much like the meaning of my hands if they hurt, because I am a manual therapist and I work with them and I need them for so many things, that has a high meaning, but they don't define my sense of self beyond my work and my ability for self-care. Genitals, reproductive function, your sense of who you are as a human is really much more linked to those bits of connective tissue and sensory nerve endings and blood supply and glial cells than they are to the ones in my hands. So the
huge amount more interoception.
Yeah, and it can have so much weight put on it, so much demand put on it, at the same time as being abysmally understood. Sometimes told you can't even look at it. And there's some cultural things. Like I've worked with people who were told, if you take a mirror and you look at your own genitals, females, then you need to confess that to your religious leader, because that's a horrible, sinful thing to do. All right. And then you get pain in that part of you. How are you supposed to take care of it? How do you develop a sense of ownership?
Well, you spoke about neglect to begin with, right? Like learning for people in that area. Sandy, I think too, like what Julie's talking about, where I struggle with this concept is, one, I think we're trying to fit pelvic floor conditions into the model of GMI in which they do not fit well.
I agree.
Because I think that we can do explicit motor imagery, we can do implicit motor imagery. I think the laterality is problematic. And two is that I always get caught up in like, does the motor component, does a contraction and a relaxation really matter? And I get caught up in that, I think, a bit more than Jilly, because I have a primary interest in dyspareunia and vulvodynia, and Jilly is a bit more in the bladder world. So I really, but then I keep going back, I go back, and I'm like, does it matter, Katie? Does it not matter? I don't know if it matters.
It matters for space. So for pressures, you know, they would talk about the pelvis like it's a clock, right? And I very firmly, from my topographical explorations, I think of it more like a butterfly shape.
Yeah.
And then if you take that lower part, like from 9 to 3 on a clock, and you lift it all up to between 9 and 3, that is what a non-relaxing, oh, and then bring the sides in. That would be what a non-relaxing pelvic floor feels like. So instead of that butterfly shape, you get a smooshed place.
Do you think a patient needs to know that visual representation?
It can when they tell me, well, it feels crowded. And what's wrong with me when I try and put my finger in and it hurts my urethra? Well, that hurts your urethra because your pelvic muscles are not relaxed. So they're lifting the whole floor up, like essentially the back wall, but you know, you don't have as much space. And as those muscles relax and become more graceful in their ability to contract and relax when they're done, you have the space you would need. And then your sensitivity is more likely to be normal because you can just touch a part, not scraping against all the parts at one time. I've talked to people, it's like trying to put your foot in a shoe that's a size too small for you.
Yeah, I say they're trying to go through a door that's not open.
Well, that too, that's these, right?
Yeah.
And so the superficial ones, if the door's closed, like nope, plus that lifts up.
The deep one, yeah.
So it's not so much that they need a certain strength, it's that they need that coordination
Range
and
of motion.
control to have, range. We do vaginal range of motion.
The bit that you just said though, so you said that they need to understand that motor component because it matters for spatial representation, and they need to understand it if they have basically a distorted sensation, if they have a somatosensory distortion. And so this is, you've just given me another PhD question. So what's Katie and I are looking.
We're like
together.
7 PhDs deep now. Yeah.
We are. Love it. Because there is, I'm going to add this to the lit review now. So what I'm looking at and what I'm interested in is sensory distortions of the perineum, and Katie's coming along for the ride with her own PhD in vaginismus and vestibulodynia. She's the queen. But we're interested in if that is different to different states and the role of interoception and that kind of whatever. But what question we got there is actually, in my mind, I'm thinking of patients. I mean, there aren't many, but there are patients where a huge sensory distortion exists, but you palpate and there is no motor element. So to what degree do sensory distortions occur with a motor element of that pelvic floor change, which, I'll add it on.
I don't know that we could predict them by anything they could tell, and that's why doing evals are so much fun. You like the lady that I saw today, from her evaluation, I would not have been surprised to find a pelvic floor that just didn't respond to her explicit signal to move, and possibly no sensation of what was going on. She had really good sensation and fabulous strength and relaxation. So then I'm back to thinking, do you just not want to feel it? Like, are you putting that over there? Like, I don't want to connect with this part of me, so I don't feel it when I'm using it.
Well, so I've got two large things on that. The Dias paper, which granted is a crappy methodology in 12 patients, but nonetheless, it's quite a nice example that you can have individualized. So they looked at BPS versus non-BPS patients, normals, and they mapped increased tone using EMG. And they've got these lovely maps, and they look vastly different. You can tell which one is the patient group, but also within the patient group are lots of people with no tone changes, and within the normals you've got patients with some increased tone that's transient or persistent, so you could swap them over, and that showed a lovely individualized pattern of tonal changes. And I think that comes down to, well, probably many things, but one of the things I'm really interested in is how you register the sensory information and what your brain does in processing it. So anterior cingulate cortex, what that does, or insula, in processing our interoceptive information and giving us a predictive idea of what
it's accurate.
Yeah.
Right. We don't need this level of accuracy in our pelvises,
no,
but we do need a level of accuracy. And do we still?
And you mean sensation?
sensation, body
Or do you mean
awareness, and
motor?
space, both, because like I would be really helpful if I knew if my hand was contracted or not. And that's going to be a blend of motor and sensory, because part of it's stiffness and pressure assessment in the muscles themselves, but the other part of it is if my hand's touching other parts of my hand. So I don't know how to clinically differentiate that in a pelvis.
Not without, you can't do independent motor study without having.
Yeah, because if I'm doing it, they already have sensory input.
Yeah.
Right.
So I don't know how to differentiate that. I don't know
And
that in
cultural
normal
and-
they would need to. You're either sitting on a sharp rock or having normal peeing enjoyment and pooping sensations.
What about like a visual inspection? If you don't touch them and you just are looking at their perineum and you say contract, and they can contract, and relax and they can link, like
That tells me
but they still
that
have their own interoception and sensation of that.
that tells me that when they say go to those muscles, they go, and their legs aren't and their belly's not. So that does do some of this accuracy. The go signal and the don't go signals are accurate, but it tells me absolutely nothing about what it feels like.
Yeah.
To them. So I think both are important for normal healthy function. I don't know that I could weight one against the other. Because you can have fabulous muscle control and coordination and hurt.
Yeah.
You have fabulous muscle control and coordination and not hurt. So I don't know that they're linked.
No.
And the opposite.
Yeah.
And the opposite, right? So they're not linked, but they live in the same space. So for functional use, it's best if they're both optimal.
And there's a degree of optimum, and I think you're absolutely right in saying the precision of optimum functionality and sensation in the pelvic floor is really wide. We're really not precise. I mean, I think how much as a common assessment.
Thank God. I mean, really, we don't want any more precision in there. That would be
it wouldn't be that useful. Yeah, it would. Clitoral precision, great, but when you palpate someone, and like commonly something I find often is obturator internus will be felt anteriorly on the opposite abdominal wall, either side below the belly button or somewhere else. How much precision we don't have, and that's in people that aren't in pain, that is just postnatals.
And does that what functional purpose would it use, or is that just an interesting factoid that doesn't really have a functional carryover?
Well, why do we not have that functional ability internally, and why do we in our hands, our feet, and things we can see?
Or things that just have contact with them more often? Like, is it practice?
Elbow creases or
exposure?
Now, that would be really, really interesting to talk to people that had a lot of pleasurable sex, like lots. You talk about your like long distance runners. Who are our long distance?
The marathon sexers.
Yeah, right. Well, and maybe not, maybe frequency. But
like, do they have better interoception? Do they have
that's
better?
What I'm wondering. I mean, because they would have been running the sensory processing and their proprioceptive awareness, and then muscular contraction and vascularization and all that stuff, a whole lot more than someone who's not as
well. By that
much
same
of an
premise, you could train
practitioner.
them. You could train them on that same premise. Couldn't you, like your
pelvic
patients?
Health therapists. We mean that would be, pelvic health therapists could do. Yeah, I can contract the right side of my pelvic floor more than my left, because we spend so much time doing it. But can normal people? Probably, if you train them to. Do they have to?
No,
not so much. Do we even know? Has anyone done that study? Like, what's normative?
Yeah, so as a common thread in other studies, so one of the interoceptive tools of awareness is awareness of heartbeat. And commonly, I'm a cardiac patient, and they say, do you get any palpitations? And many times I've asked them to define what they think palpitations means. And they say awareness of your heartbeat. And I went every single day for the last 12 years, every single heartbeat. And for 3 or 4 years, every single heartbeat hurt. And every time I've got a cold or a cough, every heartbeat hurts. Not a lot, but a little bit. And my central chest awareness is huge. vastly improved. I have interoceptive awareness of the whole of my chest cavity that I shouldn't have, because I've been trained to have that through illness and surgery. So we know that can vastly change, and we know that can be upregulated in our patients. And certainly the pain program helped us. The problem of pain helped us to understand the minutiae of why that would occur in great length and depth. But what do we do then when we want to change that? Because I think we had a chat a while ago when we talked about if someone's attending to it a great deal, like me right at the start, you don't want to get them to attend to it more. You want to place their body in space. So what is it about what we do and how we do it, and how do we do it to get someone to attend less to their interoception within their vagina if they're dyspareunic, or vulva if they're...
I think the same, which would answer the second part of that, is what is GMI? I think it's attention, and a right sizing of sensory motor awareness and use in whatever proportion they need for their problem. And why would it work? Putting aside, I have no idea how to define what work means or how to measure it. I'm going to go by patient saying that they now feel normal. I think that if we have, when we do I think assessments are necessary, because I need to know how to steer. So if they're under attending, like if they don't, like the lady that I'm thinking is what's going on today, she needs to become aware of those normal pressures from I don't even know where it exists, to finding it and having body ownership of it again, just like the surrounding areas. So
sorry, pause in there. You're talking about phenotyping those that need to attend and those, neglectors versus
sensitivity.
To bring the tails of that back to the middle. So I would want to work on explorative touch and inside and outside and kind of body mapping for neutral or pleasurable sensation. And then forget about it because it is not normal to have to do that forever for the rest of your life to have it work. So you would be like, get it to normal, and then it should maintain. And then you'd be able to stop doing any particular self-treatment because you would be in normal homeostasis. I'm going to use that word a lot now, Jilly. And then for the ones that are over attending, who always know what their tailbone feels like and always know what the pressure on their vulva is like, and knows what the pressure on their vagina is like, even though they're not really having pressure on their vagina. And for them, I want them engaged in something else. And much like the training of sports where you're aiming for a target on the, like, hit the blue square, not kick your foot with neutral rotation. I want that kind of things. And that's where I'll use virtual reality a lot.
Tell me all about the VR.
It's just playing. So when you're in a virtual reality system, you are an avatar in an environment, and it does something you enjoy, because that goes back to what does that do inside of us? Well, that's dopamine and serotonin and anti-inflammatory mediators everywhere. And I wouldn't want it pelvic centric. I don't even know what that would look like. But anything where your body is moving while you're in that space. So all of the sport things, whether you're shooting arrows at stuff and trying to duck away from a target, or swimming with dolphins and trying to duck to get around the one that just came right at you, or doing the Beat Saber thing where you're trying to hit the boxes and all the different things, something that is kinetic in standing, because then you're getting all of the hip rotations and trunk rotations and lunges and squats and things without thinking about them.
But to be clear, this isn't like vaginal. This is like up and like
vaginal. You're in clothes, you've got the headset on, you've got your little hand things, and you're playing a game.
Okay, but it's like the arms are going. You don't have like
arms
a
are going,
probe
your
put
body's
in, like the
squatting
old
and lunging.
EMG probes that were like
Nope.
jump over the mountain with your vagina and like, no,
Nope.
okay, none of that. Okay.
Nope. Jump over the mountain with your vagina.
Do you remember
that's
like the
hilarious.
EMG games, the biofeedback
Yeah,
games?
yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
Not that, to be clear.
I like the staircase one. It's always like,
Yeah.
I'm going to climb the staircase with my,
But to be clear, Sandy, you are saying that you don't need to do mirror work and you don't necessarily need to do laterality, and therefore we shouldn't be using the term GMI because it's not GMI.
I think we need a different term.
Yeah.
Yay. Okay.
Great.
Which is
Katie-
why in the revision for why pelvic pain hurts, there's going to be a question mark there in the title, and then it say, you know, this you will have read this term in other things, and it's a part of a series that Adrian Lowe wrote, so we didn't want to just take it out.
Yeah.
Because he does talk about it in places where GMI is very appropriate. But my paragraph's going to be what we're probably doing instead of what you might have read in other books is getting you to be aware of and comfortable with these body parts in a way where you can use them confidently and comfortably, or something to that effect. And it's really about
Goldilocks
attention.
awareness. So I like your
Yeah.
attention, almost like attention precision. So we're finding the Goldilocks bit of attention. So not too much, not too little.
Yeah.
In a way that deals with socio-cultural, psychological biases. You know, everyone's different.
Logistics. I mean, you can't have a program that's all rubbing labias or putting something in rectums or vaginas. It's when are you going to do that 6 or 7 times a day to get the input? It can't happen. Well, it
Going
could,
back to something that you said before that's to do with that, when we were talking about pain, you were saying how peripheral sensitization, and we know all the chemicals and blah 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 that make that work now, and how that can be a feedback loop, and that you need to repeat good things in that to give it new novel sensations in a pleasurable way. So with the hypervigilant, hypersensitive patients, would you then not do some form of active look, touch, feel?
I absolutely would, wherever that felt good. So as close to the area as you could, but really truly anywhere, because it can be any sensation. It could be looking at a rose that's your favorite color that smells fabulous and really enjoying it. That is going to have that anti-inflammatory dopamine, serotonin hit in a way that will have an effect on your autonomic nervous system. It doesn't have to be related to the part you're trying to fix. And that's beautiful, because wow, it would be complicated if it was.
Okay.
So then if you can, I mean, ideally, every part of our body should feel fine to good with normal pressures. So we want to get it back to that, but in the beginning, it could be find any part of your body that feels good to normal pressures and normal touch. How close to that area, so it's a different type of map. How close to the area that hurts can you get without triggering a protective response or having to pay for it later, or however you want to phrase that. But do it again and do it again and do it again, and try and get your map smaller and less intense until it's gone.
So we've been struggling with terminology for the last year or two, trying to find something that is meaningful for both of us, but we also don't want to reinvent the wheel. And I know that Katie, you told me I need to read Adrian's work because he talks about sensory integration. But I think we've been talking a little bit about body schema remapping. So it's not a body model, because it's much more of a fluctuating, constant state of bodiness that we want, an embodied self that we want to achieve, because that will feed into the predictive processing a bit more straight away. So kind of body schema remapping, something like that.
More normal, because we're diffuse over what Melissa Farmer and I coined a term butt print. It might have been used before, but we were trying to help someone restore a normal tolerance to their butt print of like, what do you call that? What do you call the thing when you put your feet on the floor and now it doesn't hurt? That's your footprint, right? So if you're sitting on a surface and that whole area no longer hurts, that would be your butt print.
So like a vulva print?
Well, but we don't have that specificity in normal, so I wouldn't want to train it.
What do you mean? Say that again in different words.
We don't, it is not normal, I don't think, or I'm hyposensitive to when you're sitting on a surface to have a really good, clear visual of what your vulva feels like, unless you're paying attention to it. You'd have to find it.
I would say that we have the sensory awareness, we have the insula making those inferences is what's going on constantly,
but they're not here,
but they're not felt. So they're not
over there.
They are not what's it called, enacted. They're not felt,
right?
So it's not, I wouldn't necessarily say that we're not retraining that, because we do want to retrain a normal sensory load, and then you want to retrain an ignored.
Yes. Okay. I like that, because it's like I will tell people, it's like, okay, so how does your left big toe feel? And they're like, well, it's fine. I said, but you weren't aware of your left big toe until I said those words. And then you could find it. We want that kind of, it's there, but it's not here.
Gotcha.
To their butt
I understand.
So it's a process of normalizing attention, normalizing awareness, normalizing motor and sensory awareness.
Progressively.
In a way that can be maintained, right? But in a way that can be reproduced and maintained, so that the signal that comes with it gets more and more right-sized.
Yeah. More
so
right-sized. I like that.
Well, because I don't quite know what the size is supposed to be.
Yeah, no, I'm laughing, but that's what it is, isn't it? It's like more right-sized.
Okay, so that's not a really good acronym. We've got progressive normalization of sensory motor attention and awareness.
Not
very sexy like GMI. We'll keep whittling it. We've got so many on it.
But I do think that what we're doing is not graded motor imagery. I do think it's selected attention.
Mm-hmm.
Selective attention training. Then you could call it SAT.
You've already called it that. You've got your sit and your
I have sit, my sit kit. Yeah. I was going to try to come up with but you have to have something that could be globally. It's not naughty. Yeah, I mean, because I do think that that's what it is, but it's right sizing it. It's normalizing it, whatever normal might be for that person.
I like that.
Right sizing.
Right sizing it.
I agree that we are doing a selection attention training, but I think there is a whole bit of sensory attention training and rebuilding of body schema, because we both saw the Haase paper from 2015 a while back. I love it. It's really cool. And that role of maladaptations in the interoception.
Yeah.
Being a potential driver of the maintenance of long-term.
I think that's so critical, because we see it in the clinic a lot of people who are like, no, it's normal. Like, do you have a problem with it? No, it's fine, it's normal. And then you get them to describe their normal, and it is actually very maladaptive. It's just that they have adapted to something that's really not in their long-term best interest. So to them now it feels normal. Those are hard. There's an overlap to this somewhere with when someone's had a stroke and they're sitting off to the left and they think they're sitting up in the middle.
Yeah.
And their body awareness is off, and we have to train what that actually is again, because the sense of that is an error.
Yeah, it's on the same scale. That's one end of it.
I had a patient once that told me that he felt, as a guy, and he said he felt like if he did one of those body map things, that he was shifted to the left and rotated a little, and he couldn't figure out a way to get his self back where it needed to be.
And that goes back to that what are we calling it, that questionnaire that
the free pack.
The free pack, yeah, it goes back to some of the wording on the free pack about like the disconnect with their pelvis and the body, and like our paralleling with neglect a little bit.
Right. And it's also foggy, because because there isn't something that we can have them show us and put it against a norm, or we could measure objectively and put it against a norm.
No, but also some of the we're analyzing the what's called the validation study on that at the moment, and some of the data coming back from people that have taken the free pack is saying there's quite a few times on different questions that they are clearly stating that they want something that measures the disconnect and something that measures their confidence in that body part, and something that measures awareness as separate
entities.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And we didn't, that wasn't something I would even have considered, but it's coming back on quite a few questions.
Interesting.
And that what you've done really nicely today, Sandy, for me, is look at mechanisms for phenotyping who this will be appropriate for. And you've put it into two really easy camps, the neglectors and the avoiders and the hypervigilant or the hypersensitive. And the way that, and we can measure that so easily in lots of different ways in clinic. And what I've been playing with for the last couple of years is, you've all seen the videos that I do with patients that obviously have given me consent to share them, that I used to show them to everyone. And then if they responded emotionally or had any kind of autonomic response, even if they weren't, breathing, coughing, swallowing, flushing, heart rate increasing, feeling sweaty, feeling funny afterwards, any of those kind of autonomic responses, we talk about why that might be. And it might be a psychosocial driver or sociocultural driver. It isn't normal to look at vaginas in a physio's office. And it may be, actually, I'm really sad, I'm just thinking of one off the top of my head. We haven't had sex since I had a kid and had a perineal tear, and actually looking at this area is really affronting to me and I feel really bad and I'm going to have a panic attack, which would be someone that would need to then do that. But then there are lots of people that are just like, yeah, it's a fanny.
Yeah, right. And so that's interesting. The hypersensitivity could be on both the neglectors and the hypervigilance.
Yeah.
So I don't think hypersensitivity is a way to tell which one they are. I need more info.
You think people that have neglect also have hypersensitivity? Yeah,
they don't like it touched. They don't like feeling it. So their boundaries, like, I do not want to feel this part. You are triggering my sensory awareness of this part, and I want it to stop as soon as possible. So it's going to be, nope, too much.
But do they provide the same acute detail that like your classic hypersensitivity patients would? Like, I can feel it on the right side of the back half of my
because
labia.
I'm just going by, do you have a normal tolerance to touch?
Gotcha. Okay.
Not a precision localization kind of thing.
Okay.
But do you tolerate normal touch normally? People who don't want to feel it at all can be hypersensitive to normal touch. People who feel it all the time can be hypersensitive to normal touch.
But then their precision and accuracy might be different.
Yeah. I mean, even to right and left, and that's where right and left, because all we know is right and left should match-ish. So can you tell if I'm on the right or left side? No, I can't really localize it at all. And then I want them to have that skill. But if they're like, I know exactly what you are, and all of that stuff, then I would like them to think about it less. And them I want engaged in something else externally or somewhere else in their body, as opposed to let's map this part out for you.
So you're just taking attention, hyperattentive or neglectful.
Say that again.
You're taking attention as your primary phenotyping for GMI. Those that are hyperattentive get the generalized body stuff. Those that are neglectful, but potentially hypersensitive, but neglectful, so I don't want to feel it, I don't want to engage with it, get the engagement with it. And then what scale are you using to look at that? How do you then go, right, all these guys in the middle don't need it?
It's more of a yes or no. Middle, like, can you, basic proprioceptive awareness, like, can you tell if your palm is pointing, face up or face down? It's not a precision. Is it a yes or a no? Which is similar to the laterality. It's like, is it right or left? Not is it. It's a rather dichotomous, I guess. one or the other. I don't have a way to measure it on any scale, so I tend to go with a yes or a no.
So laterality awareness on palpation of the vagina, vulva.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's bringing laterality back in, Jody.
Yes, I
But
know, we just
very
got rid of it.
minimally. Not, you don't have to
Andy.
recognize someone else's because we don't spend time doing that. But can you on palpation tell if it's your left foot or your right foot, or your left vagina or your right vagina, your left testicle, your right testicle?
And this comes back into some of that Adrian Lau stuff where it's like, I think it's him that puts the 6 dots on the low back and like, am I at dot 1, 2? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a couple ways to do that, of just proprioceptive awareness.
Yeah.
But that comes back to how normal is it to be able to tell whether it's the left or right of your vagina on palpation, and it might be your first ever time. I mean, I'm thinking
Might
of
be
all
the
the
first ever time
postnatals.
anyone's already asked you, but you would know. I assume you would know through the perineum, so that if you sat on something or if there was a fold in something, you would know where to go to change it.
Yeah.
You might not have the vocabulary around that, but you would have a body sense.
Okay. Because I'm equating it back, and yeah, I'm very aware of my bias that we see all the bad stuff in clinic because we don't see normals. So all my postnatals that aren't in pain, or my perimenopausals that aren't in pain, when I palpate them and they just have no clue where I am, they are actually people that are sensorially neglectful. So they're hypo-attentive.
They might be, and you might need to do a quick stretch to have them find it. So that the input that you're giving may not be sufficient for them to actually register it. It might need a little, hey, here, what's this feel like here? But I know that's not necessarily abnormal anywhere else in the body. It's just, are you attending yet? I need you to attend here. Where is this?
And if they're not able to,
then I would like them to be able to, at least in a general sense.
okay.
Because I think your right and your left side should match. And
actually it makes sense, because those people that, I'm just thinking, those people that can't attend the simple, straightforward postnatals that you do, with urinary incontinence that you do training with, or prolapse symptoms, they become more able to attend to their pelvic floor, more able to switch it on with the training we give them, more aware of their sensory information, their interoception over time. So maybe they are on the scale. It's just in pain. We need to be looking at that scale.
I mean, even like with like constipation doesn't count because that's a 360-degree thing. It's not a right or left side of your anus or rectum. Hemorrhoids could be a right or a left side, but even then it doesn't matter. They're so close together. So I think some parts of the body that matters, some parts it doesn't, for function.
And that would make total sense with what you've already done, Katie, with giving women with vaginismus pictures of vaginas and seeing their reactions.
Yeah. I remember how we were saying, I always feel like vaginismus and vestibulodynia, they respond to those pictures differently. Someone who's a true vaginismus patient versus someone who's able to engage in intercourse but has pain with it. Those are two camps, I find.
Yeah.
I need to think about this now.
But I do believe that the vestibulodynia patients that you see all the time are the ones with massive sensory distortions, that they have a hugely peripherally sensitized vulva. Their predictions about that area are massively skewed. The ones with vaginismus and that are dyspareunia have a primarily motor-driven sensory issue, which is only in certain situations. And that's, what we do is we do normalizing of sexual contact or vaginal contact and pressure and all that kind of stuff. Whereas in vestibulodynia, you do a whole lot more, sensory, lumbar input, proprioceptive, general hip stuff, anything and everything to calm down that area on fire.
Yeah.
So that would make sense that they're distinct different phenotypes, which we they are the different classifications. And in terms of what we're thinking with GMI, we would then be sub-phenotyping the vestibulodynias, particularly into the ones that need up regulation or down regulation of their body schema.
Yeah.
Body mapping.
Yeah.
Go write a chapter on that now, Sandy.
Yeah,
Oh,
please.
jeez. Thank you. Send me the recording.
This is really good. I feel like we've gone a long way forward today, Katie. I don't know about you.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. I told you we need to talk to Sandy.
yeah.
I was like, Sandy will make us feel better about this.
Well, and I'm just sitting here listening to Jilly going, you make it all sound so brilliant.
But you're
You know,
telling it.
and
She's so eloquent with she speaks, isn't she?
That's my accent.
but go with it. Just own it. Own it.
But I think
You're very good at making complex ideas more concise.
Yeah,
because I
you
don't
clean them up
speak
very nicely.
quickly. I have to bring them down. But I think you've also nicely helped square off where me and Katie's PhD is now, because we both want to look at, and we're very interested in how we do the processes of GMI. We need to scrap that completely, and we're not allowed to call it not GMI anymore either. We have to call it something else.
Progressive selective attention training. It's
I
PSAT.
like it.
It's PSAT now.
Yeah.
It's a test. That's a test here in the US.
Yeah. Yeah, we do SATs here as well, but like when you're 6.
Oh,
Right. And the PSAT is the pre-SAT.
Yeah. But we need to call it something else, because I think I really want to jump into exploring how all of this kind of imagery and stuff, why it works, how it works, who we can phenotype for it to work best with, how we can apply it. But actually, the more and the more that we keep talking about this, we can't create protocols, because it's about the individual and who responds to horse riding, who responds to dancing, who responds to,
And there you have Dr. Frank Tu's frustration with me over the past 10 years, because he wants protocol. And I keep saying they're principles, not protocols.
Which is another slide I borrowed from you. Yeah. Principles, not protocols. So we need, instead of necessarily digging in because the next stage, Katie, you're looking at what images are relevant.
Mm-hmm.
I think you would get, from what we've, the last couple of things that we've read and spoken to, I think you would just get so much of a mash of data that it wouldn't necessarily be meaningful, because there'd be so much socio-cultural stuff about how people respond to images of vulvas when they're in pain, and do we even need to be exposing them to that? Can we sub-phenotype them into people that are neglectful versus hyperattentive?
That's my husband coming home that you just saw.
I keep muting
the
because
kids
it's
locked
like
in the basement.
Water's
Yes, I have to
getting
rescue
turned
my
on.
kids from the basement, and I've got patients waiting for me at the clinic.
Okay.
Yay.
We'll head
I
off.
have to just go let him in.
But so I think what I'm going to spend the next period of time exploring, like the next 5 years exploring, is all this kind of phenotyping around sensory motor awareness, how that interacts in different pain states, neglect and hyperattentional, hyperawareness, hypervigilance. And that's one of the things the 3PSQ measures, but we can measure these kind of things in people.
Yeah. If someone just needs to sit down and get norms.
Yeah.
Because that would be fabulous.
Yeah, I mean, this is the data.
I'll ponder a what would I call it?
Yeah, please do. We've been doing it for a year, and we've got literally lists and lists and lists of words. And we were trying to get away from exposure, because you don't get any money if you say you're going to do exposure with a vagina.
It sounds naughty.
Well, and the ethics boards had some concerns about it too.
No, but there's all kinds of words around proprioception and things like that, that sound like this is the normal body homeostasis, and we're going to get you back to it. But to get you back to it, we need to know where you are. So we're going to see where you are.
And it's not just the proprioception, the interoception, it's the cultural, it's the psychological grounding.
But honestly, I think that proprioception includes all of that. Like, because can you, because to know where your body is in space, you also need to know the space.
Yeah, but proprioception is a subgroup of interoception.
The arrows.
Yeah.
The arrows.
All the arrows. So yeah.
That's why I like interoception now. I'm big on it.
Yes.
I've got lots of it.
Got lots of interoception. Yeah. fun. Oh, you guys are gonna make my head hurt today. This is good.
Can we come back and chat again at some point?
Please, this is so much fun.
Yeah.
I so greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much, Sandy, for letting me sit down with you and you too, Jilly, and for me bugging you guys again.
Absolutely.
Really
And
interesting.
please, you guys just keep doing this work. You make it easy for all of us. So yay.
Following our obsession.
Yeah.
Our
Isn't that
interest.
great? All right.
Lovely to see you both. Yeah.
Yeah, so send me the link when it's up because I'd
Okay.
love to listen to this again.
Will do.
Awesome.
And I'll link everything underneath that your book, your videos, other stuff.
And the name of the paper that we're talking about too.
And the name of the
that
paper we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yes, which
Embodied
I will
Predictive
read.
Processing, Kiverstein, 2022. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you both. Big love.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.